get started.
That's what
It was great to have the video to watch, so I felt like I was here. Kudos to Andrew and the rest of the city team. The quality of those videos is outstanding, so if you ever want to revisit the meeting, it's a great way you can hear, the sound quality is really, really good. So I did feel like I was able to get really engaged in what you guys were discussing, so I appreciate that. Apologize for being on speaking at a banker conference in Pennsylvania and had some difficulty from a travel standpoint of being able to be here and there at the same time. So I'll call the meeting to order, and we have minutes from April 16th that were distributed. Did everyone have a chance to review? Were they? Was everyone able to
Were they
receive
attached?
them?
I'm sorry, I missed them if they were attached.
Andrew distributed them in his email.
Okay, I missed it.
Is that a motion? I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Thank you.
To
Is there
approve.
a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Let me see the minutes.
Any opposed? And based upon the previous meeting, it looks like we had 4 questions that we wanted to have answered. You guys did a great job of moving through there, and David did a great, wonderful job chairing the meeting. I don't see him here tonight. But the first question was, do we want to extend the sales tax? There appeared to be quite a bit of discussion about that, and the opportunity to discuss it here today. So I'll open the floor out to discuss the pros and cons of extending the tax to meet the capital improvement needs. Yes.
I was on the school board for 5 years, and one of the things I think is the smartest thing they've ever done is that they continue their bond issues year after year after year. They don't go away, they don't raise your taxes, they have money, and people are used to voting for it because it's not going to really make a difference to what they're used to doing. So I think when we've got one in place and people are used to it, and we have so many needs, would be silly, or it would be prudent to continue it.
I agree. The capital needs of the city are just so great, and to keep Edmond competitive, we really need to extend the sales tax, and it's just imperative that we do that here in this task force.
Is there anyone that would like to?
I was just, so one of the other things that the school board does that is nice is you always have that list of projects that they want. And I think that's, if we go forward with the sales tax, one of the nice things that we can do is come up with a good, healthy list of projects that we would have, if we all benefit from it.
Is there any opposition to?
Madam Chair, would you accept that as a motion?
Yeah, well, I want to give opportunity if there's
We
someone.
can do that in discussion, I think, after we, a motion on the floor probably will help get discussion.
Second.
Okay. And is there some discussion? Is there anyone that's opposed to the motion or would like to further discuss the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So we did have yes on A, so we
That
will
was the easy one.
move to B.
That was the easy part.
Yeah, it's-
Don't get excited.
Well, depending on what you think are the purposes of our group,
Here's the hard
right?
part.
We may be done. But it should be extended at the same rate.
And I have one comment on this to maybe it's a motion before the motion, to kind of define the boundaries in which we discuss the amount. I don't know, I'm certainly not prepared and don't know if we want to tackle the question of specific portions of a penny increases and that sort of thing. And so, you know, one idea that I threw out last time was, you know, maybe this is just a simple renew at the same or renew at an increase, and we leave it at that and leave it up to, you know, other policymakers to determine, you know, what that is. But, you know, that's kind of my thought, unless we're willing to devote the time and effort and energy to analyze the increase and how it be used and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I kind of felt the questions last meeting that we were presenting were mainly to get a focus of what we needed to do. I don't know if we can answer
Ready
these
for that.
last 3 questions today. I mean, it's, but the question is this our Bill, are these the three questions we're trying to answer throughout the next several meetings? And then at that point, maybe have answers or at least suggestions?
I think that's a good point. Mr. Childress?
If you're going to ask people to give a presentation and you don't have a framework, in my mind, to evaluate that with, for example, you know, whether it's a 5% for 5 years or 10 years, I mean, it kind of depends on how you want to look at projects. I mean, it was kind of something I kind of threw out to Andrew, that the staff gave us for 15 years, not 5 or 10. So, in essence, we need some guidance from them on what they see as under 5 and under 10. And, you know, if you set a half cent now, 5 years or 10 years, before we get done, we can always change it. But then at least you have something that we're kind of trying to put things in a package with, that at least expresses our feeling initially, and then we may change it.
I thought it was very interesting in listening and watching the video, thinking about maps for Oklahoma City and researching a little bit about how that went underway, and it looked more as if there was some funds set aside, yet there was a group that was comprised to oversee those funds and determine what would be the best suitable investments for those dollars. And it reminded me a lot about what we're talking about in here. And I know we have such an overwhelming list of priorities from the staff, and then we all have interest in what we think the priorities of the city could be, but maybe instead of coming up with a list of projects, what would it be that we come up with an amount of money that we're willing to invest to make the city better, and then maybe there's some priorities that we can, rather than specific projects, to give to the council, and maybe it is something structured like maps where you have some type of governing body, or I don't know the right terminology, that kind of helps the city guide to how that should be invested over the next few years, rather than having the determination in this group.
Larry, don't we have a capital investment board?
We have yes, in fact, the Capital Projects Financing Task Force is who the council envisions basically being the oversight group for this group. They were with the 96 and the 2000 tax.
So what our task is to say yea, nay, whether or not we want to see capital improvements continue, and then come up with a budget or a projected budget, because nobody's going to tell us exactly how many sales dollars we're going to get. And then possibly 3, come up with a list of saying, this is our wish list. We'd like to see roads continue, we'd like to see this continue, we'd like to see that continue, but we also want you to bring in this. Correct?
I think frankly, you could be as general or as specific as you want to be. You could say, we think road projects are important, or we think these road projects are important. Getting down to prioritizing those again, I think you could spend the rest of your time.
We'd be down in the
For this-
weeds.
Yeah, I think the weeds, that statement that I think you brought up, or
Yeah, I'm
someone else
sorry, I
did.
brought it up.
No, I thought it was great, because it's easy to get drawn into them, but.
It really is. We've got great people presenting. Mr. Childress came up with a great structure for us to start saying, but do we really want to get down? We've got 19 different opinions. Do we really want to try to get down and sell our own agenda, or do we want to say, listen, I'm blanking on the number of dollars we're getting right now, but, you know, 4 to, Larry, how many dollars are coming in with the half cent right now?
Well, what we estimated was for 5 years, roughly 40 million.
So, you know, do we want to put a pool
Probably
of
be a
$40
little
million
more.
together? Or, you know, if we want to go for a 10-year deal, $80 million together? That's not going to work, because we're going to get increased sales. But you know, some sort of corpus from which the capital investment, I'm blowing their name again. Capital Investment Project.
Financing Task Force.
Yes, that task force can draw from. And you have on there we know we need the roads, we know we need this. There's a group of us who probably would like to see the Edmond UCO performance. There's probably a group of us who'd like to see improved parking downtown. But do we really want to get into the weeds and into the discussion on those points, rather than say, guys?
Yeah, and I think that you could even, somewhere in between, say that these are our top 3 priorities, and how you kind of even, how you like to see the allocation of funds, not specifically, but just how you would like to kind of divvy it up. So then you're kind of having more of a MAPS type of focus. And I was trying to think of a cool acronym, and I just couldn't get there.
Not yet.
But, yes, please.
Yeah, you know, I'm totally making this up. I haven't heard or spoke to anyone. But if I were in the shoes of a city council person, or, you know, someone that we're recommending to, and, you know, realizing that they're going to have to take this information and then make a decision on whether to put this on the ballot and how to approach it and everything else, it would be helpful to me in that position if there was a cross-section of the citizens that came and gave me some ammunition to go out and say, hey, you know, we were told that an increase in the tax would be, you know, something that could be tolerable. Or we were told, no, renewal is, you know, kind of what everybody's looking for. And we were told that these 3 areas, you know, are, you know, like, people are interested in roads and downtown and, you know, whatever we end up choosing, these 3. So, you know, I'm going to use those as kind of my PR campaign to, you know, sell this thing. I think that would be information that they would, you know, be able to leverage, you know, so to speak. More so than a specific list.
John?
And I concur. I think what I'm listening for is, you know, when we go through the project, the presentations, what I'm listening for, what are the projects that are being proposed, and how does the city management and council go through the process of evaluating those, and what is that quality, right? So if I saw a list of just projects that were ridiculous, I'd probably form a different opinion than the I to support the sales tax. I'm looking at the budgeting statistics, and luckily and unluckily for the city, we had a hard time in 2008, 2010, so you can see, you know, what's past performance of city management, of how they deal with economic crises, and how does the city respond to that? How have we spent the half penny that was already approved, and did that result in more expenses to the city or more revenue to the city? And I think what we're seeing is forming my own personal opinions, right? And then the other is overall the process itself, the people that have been elected and what they're doing. And to me, that, you know, going through those presentations, listening to those projects, listening to the master, you know, downtown plan, the public safety center, you know, helps me form whether, if I went to the voting poll, would I say yes or no. If it was an irresponsible, you know, bad list of projects, bad statistics, no way, right?
I don't think that in our position, we are going to know how much, I mean, it's not our job really, I don't see it, in determining how much money. We're really put here tasked to determine, as a community group, as a group of people from different backgrounds, whether or not we support the passage of the tax, and we've already decided that we do. Another important item on the agenda, though, I think is one that we can look at too and talk to the city manager, and that is, what are the political realities when it comes to looking at 5 versus 10 or other term for that tax? I mean, that's really maybe one of the issues as we move forward with the city. We can recommend, we're not going to recommend where to spend it. We could, but it's not going to really make any difference, I really don't think, in the long run. But we can recommend, and they can take it to the city and say, yeah, we had a diverse group of people who looked at this and suggested and wanted us to extend the sales tax and use that as support for their position. But also, we can look and see, make a recommendation on what kind of term that we might extend that tax for, and that might be interesting for you to comment on.
First of all, I got to tell you, I'm not speaking for the council. You know, we haven't had that discussion. So as long as that's understood, my thought would be I think they would be far more likely to be interested in a longer term than a higher tax. That would be my thought. I think Ann's point, I don't know how many times we've talked to the council about what the school district does. They can come back each and every year and say, same thing you've been paying, nothing new. And it resonates with the voters. My gut feeling, again, I'm not speaking for them, but I think they would be more interested in keeping the tax at the half-cent level and possibly considering a longer term.
Longer than 10 years?
No, I was thinking 5 versus 10.
Okay.
basically. So.
Do we handicap them a little bit though, if we just say we're gonna stay with the half and we take it out to 10? Knowing that as time goes, expenses, costs, everything's gonna change in that, are we limited? Did we lock ourselves in that we limit the ability to develop things in that second 5 years? Because we're at that rate that we locked in 10 years ago?
I don't know, I mean, you could make that argument, I think, but I think there'll also be some mechanism that, you know, at the end of 10 years, this isn't all gonna go away. There'll be some initiative probably to try to extend it at that point.
Oh,
And I think one of the things that hopefully we can do, we talked about it this morning, we had our budget hearing with the council today. I think we can make a heck of a case to the voters that we accomplished so many things. We accomplished the things we said we would. We also accomplished a lot of things we didn't say we were going to because we had additional funds. So I guess what I'm saying is I think we can tout a pretty good track record. So, and I think I hope that's important to the voters that did you do what you said you were going to do, and how'd you do it? What'd you get accomplished? You know, we looked at this 2000 sales tax in the 15 years since the total projects were over $160 million in that 15-year period. And one of the things can you imagine what would the community look like if we hadn't had that? When you go back and you look at all the things that have been accomplished through that, I think we can kind of build on that and kind of say, don't you want to continue that kind of progress? But I'm not a marketing guy, so I can't do that.
I think I'm at the point that, you can lay it out for discussion, but I would move, we've already recommended to approve the extension of the tax, that we recommend that it be set for a term of 10 years.
Second.
I would second.
Is there some discussion regarding that?
I have a question about it, but Sam, you were first.
Mine's going to be different than this discussion, so we
Okay.
can have this vote.
I'm following a little bit on what you said, but is it possible when they go out to have part of the projects that they want to fund, but in 7 years, we may want very different things than are on this, and if we've committed, if they have to go out and commit to all of that, we've kind of, again, tied their hands. Can the council say, well, these are major projects for the first 5 years, but we'll continue looking at things so that they've got some leeway the next? Does that work with voters to say, trust me?
I guess the only way it's been done, they talk about projects, but the actual ballot does not commit any funds to designated projects.
Because I
And
think
that's the
there'll
way
be
maps
things
was too.
Yeah.
that we want 10 years from now that are very different when,
Yeah.
what we're looking at right now.
Well, I don't think we are the ones that are the ultimate determiner. of
Exactly.
those.
It's gonna
That's
evolve, it's gonna
Mission
change.
Creek,
Yeah.
to get into that, I think.
All we're doing is laying out the funds, and making those available. And those decisions, those priority decisions will be made by the Capital Projects and Financing Task Force, recommendations to the city council, and they can change as on a daily basis. I mean, that's how I'm exaggerating, but the makeup of that committee, along with the makeup of the city council, they will change where those funds go. All we're doing is try to make the funds available for them in the
I
future.
think it's probably more a reality of they know if they talk about a project when they get it passed and they don't finish it, then they won't get reelected.
Absolutely.
And then it won't pass again.
Well-
It's not technically committed, but.
Well, but I think we need to have some sort of list, and maybe it's not real detailed, but what these funds are supposed to be used for. I mean, that's why MAPS was successful. It had a list, and that's why the bonds have the school bonds, they have a list of what the money's going for.
Well, we still have a list that hasn't been, a future projects list, and that would be the basis for.
And again, that's just staff, though, that's not necessarily your list or the public's list.
Isn't part of our charge to establish a list of things that we would like to see happen? Isn't that the best?
It's open if that's part of our charge.
Not that it's gonna
I mean,
happen, but
I
are
think
we-
that
are
there
we
needs to be
recommend that,
some
though?
sort of list to get the general public to vote. They don't have all this information that we've been given.
Yes.
I mean, it's just, they don't want to, I wouldn't want to have a blanket,
Right.
open tax that could be spent on anything. It needs, and it'd be great if it was something exciting that could get people excited too. And I'll stop.
I have some
First thing.
I have some comments on that.
Okay.
But I don't think that's related to the motion, so I'll hold them off.
And is yours related to the
It is
motion?
related to the motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I feel like before we, as to the discussion of the rate versus the term, would it'd be beneficial if we had a matrix to compare, okay, we do a slightly increased rate but a 5-year term versus the same rate but a 10-year term, put them all side by side to see at least a projection of what we might think it would generate if we do a 5-year versus a 10-year, if we increase versus extend the existing rate. That may help determine if there's some really big projects that we want to accomplish, then there's certainly costs with waiting longer to do it versus striking now.
Yeah,
So
I think that's a good point. Larry, can you respond to
There's
that?
another factor to be considered, and that's keep in mind that the bonds that we use to fund all current, they start coming off in 2021. So in 2021, we'll have $20 million more. I think in 2023, we have another $20 million, et cetera. So this will be one of the primary source, but those bonds start coming back off too, and that's pretty major money that will help with.
So if you identified what you thought would be 10 years' worth of projects, don't worry that something else might come up, because we may have another source that we can deal with that with, but you stuck with what you said you were going to do to the voters.
Personally, I like MAPS was 66 months when it was kicked off, and there's a lot of accountability, I think, that comes within 5 years, and you're able to see the progress of this is what the special tax funded, and then you're able to then go on to a separate thing. I think there's a lot of political capital and community spirit that's to be had by having it come up and having a new list of projects or priorities. So I kind of like the shorter, because I don't trust the 10 years of the council, but rather that I think it gives an opportunity to go back to voters and really get their buy-in to what you're doing and continue propelling our city forward.
Give an opportunity to adjust also. If you need more, you come back and do this in 5 years and say, now we need an increase in this is why. We're halfway there, let's finish it.
Well, keep in mind that hopefully, we're talking about more money than what we think we're talking about now. That's certainly what happened during the last, since the tax in 2000. Significantly additional revenue came in because of increased sales tax. I mean, that's our goal again, is that we're very conservative on our projections, and some of these developments that we're looking at, we could hopefully be talking about significantly more money. So, I mean, hopefully that scenario happens again. Can't guarantee that at all, but I do think it's a possibility.
But if you don't make a decision on 5 or 10 tonight, what you may want to pursue is, what would you put in the first 5 years? Then think through, well, if we had 10 years, what would we add in the second 5 years? And maybe think of it that way, and then weigh your decision, looking at the projects and say, okay, 5 years, that's good, we'll go back and ask, or, ooh, I think people would like to see that and know that it's going to move forward, so maybe 10 years is our goal. Let the projects maybe guide you in what your decision is.
And again, we can bring whoever you want to talk in detail about the various projects. I think you have some interest in that. That's up to you how much detail you want to get into. But if you want more detail about the project, because all we've given you is a little paragraph on each one.
And I think through the interviews, what I was kind of searching for, I know you were mentioning, John, what you were searching for was, is there a big sinkhole like the Public Safety Center where it's a sense of embarrassment and we're not able to serve the city because of this constraint? And so that's what I was kind of sifting through was, is there a big, eyesore out there that we need to fix? And,
You mean like one or two projects?
like there's,
Something that would excite people or
Either
cause
glamorous or
polarizing.
need.
Yes.
Significant need.
Well,
One thing to think about is another option, and maybe this is kind of a hybrid, maybe you try and find those big ones, but rather than, I feel it's going back to prioritizing every single project. And that's something else that I don't think we've talked about yet is that we could do is come up with a list of priorities and vote on those. And then by those, we're telling the council, look, our number one priority is additional revenue or, attract new residents, and maybe just prioritize kind of some themes. And then maybe that kind of avoids us from getting in the weeds. But then also, I think it's valid to look at some big projects. I don't know, I just want to throw that out there because I don't think we've talked about doing that.
Yes, John.
Is there, from a council perspective, is there a benefit to 10 over 5? Does it do something for you that?
Oh, I mean, just from the fact that you've got 10 years of revenue to rely on versus half of that. But hopefully, again, say the decision is for 5, I would hope we could make a good enough case that it be continued when you get to that stage. You're just going through that exercise at a much quicker time.
Well, we
I
have-
think the only difference would be, at 5 years, you're probably gonna pay as you go. That may be a decision you all wanna recommend too, that this tax only be used as a pay-as-you-go. But if it's 5, not that you couldn't finance it, but it seems kind of silly to go out for 2 years of financing or something, because we can only go for the life of the bond issue. So that would be the one thing about 5 versus 10, would be if you were gonna finance it.
So you're saying better finance options?
Yeah.
kind of longer.
Now,
Yes,
just
Mr.
so-
Childers.
Just so you know, there is an option that we're using with the Public Safety Center. We have internally $7 million that was the hospital trust fund. The vote was taken, when the Public Safety Center vote was taken, that allowed the city council to use that as an investment. So we could borrow in a sense from ourselves instead of going out for financing.
And that's
So,
what we're doing.
And we'll pay that note off of ourselves before the end of that 5-year tax that's out there now.
And I think the council would be receptive to, in effect, borrow.
If you borrow from the hospital trust fund, right? Does that take away cash from the hospital for future?
No.
No, the proceeds came when the
Oh, so
city
it's been
sold the
sold.
hospital in
Okay.
1982.
And all that money's been held back, some of it's, okay, thank
Since
you.
then, it was set up where you can use the interest, but if you're going to use any of the principal, it takes a voter approval to do that. So,
Yes.
Well, it sounds to me like 10 years gives us more certainty, and it gives us more options for financing, and it allows us to do more of what needs to be done for the city.
Is there any, is
My
the
motion
motion
was
was for
to
10
extend it
years?
for 10
Is that- 10 years, okay. Is there any other discussion? Are we ready for a vote?
What's your second?
Yeah.
Who made the motion to go 10 years? Steiger?
Yeah.
And somebody second that?
Yes.
So you feel- okay. Sorry, I just can't keep up with the fast-moving pace you all are.
Sorry.
No.
Yes.
I have one more.
One more.
Yeah, I mean, if it was off what you said, that, my concern would just be that it's always gonna be easier to pass, shorter term, same amount. And so, I don't disagree with any of the comments about 10,
No.
but, it is you're going to attract a lot more opposition once that hits the ballot. People that don't want it are gonna have a lot more ammo if we're asking for 10 years.
Marketing is just going to be critical.
So one thing I don't understand enough to vote, or right now I would stand against the motion, is understanding what those finance options are. Because in my mind, I pay my son, or I give my son money to go to college, I want to see grades every year, right? Because I'm the payer. If I'm the receiving end, I want the longer term, right? The guarantee. And right now, I'm paying the sales tax, right? Every time I spend $100 at Lowe's and Edmond, like half a cent or whatever, goes to that. So, I'd like to understand the financing options and how it helps the city a little bit more first, but.
So we can take the vote now, and this isn't our last meeting too, so we can also get some more information about what the impact's going to be, and whether it goes either way. So we have the motion to.
Just one,
Yes.
just one point quickly.
Yes.
It could be, the motion could be no longer than 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm not asking anyone to change the motion, I'm just simply saying it could be no longer than 10 years. And that would give you some flexibility. Well, that's just a thought.
So the motion is
Easier to sell.
for 10 years. That's the motion that's
It's a
on the
different
table.
mo-
Tim, would you like to
Tim would
amend
have to
that?
agree.
No less than 5, no more than 10? And then it would be to the council is how they put that
I
on.
like that.
Well, then we can make a determination as this committee progresses.
I would make that amendment, no less than 5, no more than 10.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, that was on item B, which was what should determine the tax would be. We decided no less than 5, no more than 10. Did we decide that we were going to wait on the rate and come back and talk about that at another time? We haven't. But,
We didn't
just make sure I was
specifically
keeping
talk
that.
about that. We talked about that maybe the intention was more of, that these are the questions that we need to ask and not necessarily that the actions that we need to take. Which is, so just, unless when Mr. Murdock was asking, are we staying at the same rate, which I think we decided that we didn't make a decision on that it just stayed as a question that we still need to answer as these meetings progress.
Great.
Well, if I remember right, Cody asked for a matrix that said half a cent versus 3/4 cent.
What would be the impact?
The impact
Basically,
five.
all of our options,
Yeah.
no change option plus
So
each
I think we
combination
can
of each.
provide that analysis pretty easily. I'm committing that if we had several different options as far as if we were going to be at half a cent or
Well, if half a
three-quarters.
cent
If half a cent is 40,
is
then we
is
know
40,
that.
then it's 60, so
Yes.
there's your matrix.
There it is.
One
But,
thing,
but I'm going to expand on that a little bit, okay? Because we were discussing that if we've got a 40 versus 60 in the 5-year time frame, that doesn't necessarily extrapolate to 80 versus 120. And if we did have the 80 out there that we were looking at, or 80 plus, what other bond options might we have, or what other financing options might we have available to us? So I think that kind of blends back into the overall matrix. I may be
You're-
expanding on Cody's thought,
Yeah,
but
I think we don't know how much we could leverage and at what rate, and then so how much debt you could take on at 75 versus 50.
and
versus
it
20.
sounds like sales tax are increasing at 5% per year. So if they are.
he shaking his head no.
Actually, we just went through that discussion today. We're projecting 2.5% growth next year, very conservative, but we had talked about 5%. The council felt more comfortable for the outer 4 years of our 5-year plan to do 4%.
Okay.
But we still think we can meet that.
So that gives us 25% growth over 10 years. So I'd have to get out a calculator to do that, what 25% growth on.
I would be interested in maybe some input from someone who is a lot smarter than I am to tell us what the risks and the political ramifications are of changing the rate. I mean, we know that if you continue the same rate historically, it's much more easily accepted by the people. We can't just assume that if we increase the rate that it's going to pass. We may be cutting our throat by doing that.
That's true.
I think there's additional pressure, I think that was talked about early. If we do increase the rate, then we do need to get a little bit more project specific on, at least that would be my.
And what about breaking it into two questions that we put to the voters? One question is simply renew the rate as existing rate, and then a second issue would be to add an additional tax of a 0.25%.
They're only going to vote for the lower one.
Well, then maybe we do the half-cent renewal first, and then we do an additional one later, I don't know.
Anytime it gets complicated with choices, I've never
Yeah,
Yeah,
done
that's
it.
so
I would
true.
say the
But I see where
addition-
you're going, yeah, I mean, I think.
Because Edmond's tax is lower than Oklahoma City, so we have a little room to increase, but if the voters are gonna reject us, of course, we don't want that.
Right.
And I think the city council would be very happy if we would just ask to extend the rate at the current, extend the term at the current rate. And we would not have near as much at risk, whereas if we push it too hard, we could jeopardize the,
Well, they could change that as it goes.
They can.
They're
They
going-
always have
they're-
that
They're going
option.
to anyway, so if the political environment is friendlier then maybe they bump it a little bit, or maybe not. That happens in that group, not this one. I'm certainly not politically savvy in a lot of ways, but the idea of leaving it the same just makes a whole lot of sense. The general atmosphere around the country seems negative to any kind of a tax increase. In fact, we have some local people that are wanting to cut things. So.
That's true.
And
Cody?
And can I get a reminder from anyone on the board or staff when we're proposing to put this on the ballot as a month? In 2016, what month?
Probably April, could be April. And one of the
Not
advantages.
not November 2016, though, right?
No, well, one advantage of early date would be if you get an initial rejection, you still have time to come back to voters. Not frankly as much for this extension of this tax, but the 1 cent tax in the general fund. If that doesn't get approved again, and it has 3 times, or it comes up every 10 years, if that doesn't get approved, it will be a disaster. We have to go back to the voters.
So is it a special election? Was that the only thing on the ballot?
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask. Are city council people up at
No.
that time?
No, there will be no city council election.
Okay.
So just be a special election on that item?
Well, not just that.
Well, the discussion has been to renew the 1 penny that is subject to 10-year review on sales tax next spring. Then also perhaps doing the item that you all are presently reviewing on a ballot. Whether or not there will be any other items, don't know. But it is not a time for election of municipal officers.
Is there any kind of, do we have any statistics on, in that type of election in Edmond, Oklahoma, how the voter turnout is? I mean, is it 10,000 people? Is it 50,000 people?
Oh, no, it's like 3,000.
Is it 2,000?
The most recent example we have is electronic messaging signs. We had 2,800 people out of 55,000.
That, I think that's what I was trying to
You have to have a strong feeling one way or the other.
Right.
Usually.
And people usually don't have strong feelings for taxes.
Municipal elections, when they're by themselves, generally don't have a huge turnout. Hopefully, we can do a lot better than 2,800. I'm thinking out loud.
And I did a study, so there's 5 cities that just went to ballots with city tax increases, and I did a matrix that had that question on it. I looked at whether it was a special election, not, what was the percentage of the population, and whether they passed or not. I could send that out to everyone, or to Andrew and have him put it in the Dropbox.
That sounds great.
And what were the,
There was one very small city that did not pass. Every other city did pass, and there was higher voter outcome when there was another, when it was part of a council or another election going
Is
on.
that in Oklahoma?
In Oklahoma, yes. It was
Probably
based-
Guthrie, right?
It wasn't Guthrie's, it was, I have to look at my list, it was another city. Sorry, I'm from Texas, so.
So based on your study, we should leave it the same, is that correct?
These were, I can't remember if they were continuances or adds.
And, we've got negative things we can talk about too, because in 2008, when we took the Public Safety Center, the first time, we took it on the national election in November. Now, a lot of things happened between when the council said, let's go with that, and the economy tanked, for one thing. Nobody anticipated that. It was also not sales tax, it was property tax. But we didn't win.
When you had a organized group against the location of it.
That was going out.
We had a
Right.
group against the location, we had a
Right.
group, a semi-group that was against the funding, or the funding formula, i.e. property tax, so.
I don't think you want any kind of a tax measure on a ballot with a presidential election.
No.
Well,
Especially not in Oklahoma.
frankly, I can't remember, we talked to somebody that was a consultant in the area. I can't remember exactly, but I think you could find somebody that would say that's a good idea, some that would say it's not a good idea. But given the time frame where we are, I think we're looking at just back to just municipal issues only on this, so.
It's good to know.
And I think that's something to keep in mind too, with the penny, renewal of the penny sales tax, the renewal of the half-cent sales tax. I think it's fraught with danger politically to try and increase that at this point in time. And if we remember the charge that was given to us when Charles spoke, that's what was specifically requested.
Yes.
And he also, I think, made the point that if the penny and the half cent, and if it were for 10 years, they would come up again the same as the renewals, and it would not cost extra for an election at 5 years.
Yeah, that one penny will come up every 10 years.
Yeah. This would make it consistent.
So
Or
if you,
could.
so if you aligned it, it would save some money as well as the political expenditures involved in that. It's a good point.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and move that we extend the rate at half a cent.
I second.
We leave it as it is.
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
This is good.
The next on D is what process do we want to follow for evaluating projects for consideration, and kind of lends to the discussion again about how far in the weeds do we want to get? Do we want to have really kind of overarching priorities that are, or nothing at all, just extending the tax is kind of what initially I think the mayor was talking about. Having something broad, having something a little more specific, or getting very specific.
I would bring this up because this is something that I brought up in the Capital Projects and Financing Task Force, I don't know, 6 months or so ago, in that not so much what projects, because those will change over time as the makeup of the committees change and the makeup of the council change. But what my concern is, and it was at the Capital Projects and Financing Task Force as well, is that we don't have a clear delineation of the processes that we need to follow in prioritizing projects. Not to say that to pick out a particular project, but what is the process that we use for prioritizing those projects? In other words, if it's a legal issue that we have to attend to, then we're going to have to put that in a higher priority. What I'm saying is, I don't think the issue here is which project. I think it is how do you decide how you're going to prioritize those projects. And that's, I think if we can make recommendations here as a larger committee, that will push on down to the Capital Projects Committee. And as they're evaluating each of the projects that come before them, then they have a clear procedure as opposed to just someone getting up and saying, you know, I really could use the money for this road or this, whatever it is, yay or nay. Why don't we come forward? And it's not something we can do tonight. I mean, I know that I have done some research on my own to look at what other cities do, and I know we do some of that too, but lay out the procedures for developing the priorities and how those should be approached. I think that's the bigger issue as opposed to which project.
Does that task force currently have no criterion that they use?
Well, no, they have criteria. I'm just saying that I think it should be better defined. And I think we, as a group, are in a position that we could influence that group by making recommendations on how those priorities should be made.
What is the criteria currently that they use for analyzing projects?
I'm really not in a position to tell you. I'm not a voting member of that committee.
Well, as an advisory task force, which that committee is to the council, most of the time, in my short time on that, most of the time, it's approval of things that the committee, that the council brings.
Sure,
forward,
always.
Okay? And I think there's no way that this citizens group is going to establish a rock-solid process.
No.
Because that's going to change also over time and needs and council and so forth. So, I mean,
But there are competing priorities within that as well, even though the city has a multiple number of projects coming forward.
well, no,
That-
I agree, but I think that's also why, you know, talk about getting quickly into the weeds. And if any of us want to run for city council, I think everybody would be fine with that, but to try to dictate what and how, which project, it would be foolish on our part from this group. I mean, we can say, hey, we still think more needs to be concentrated on streets and roads as traffic has just gotten horrendous in town, or whatever, that kind of broad, but to come forward and try to think of all these new major projects, I mean, it's just something that holds no weight, there's no hammer behind it, it would be foolish time spent, I think.
I agree with that. I agree with that completely.
Well, can't we craft some sort of language together that we think would be a good recommendation for projects? You know, high visibility projects that impact a large swath of the community, that make an impact on the community, like implementation of the downtown master plan or the Performing Arts Center, roads.
It would have to be in general terms, like
Quality of life.
Yeah.
Right, quality of life, things that make Edmond distinct and beautiful.
Do you think we need to be any more specific than that in order to get the public in favor of continuing this tax? Or would something that general be
I think
sufficient?
specific is within a range to say, we want to get Covell finished, or something like that.
We need to be a little.
You know, it's so hard to weigh quality of life against roads. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we can look at roads like, some of them are really bad, and we need to get them improved, and we can use a lot of health and safety things to say this is what we ought to do, versus, well, we need a new park. Well, it's kind of hard to measure those, but in our own lives, we do that every day to say, you know, this is a need in our family, but this is something that'd be nice to have. I think we're trying to get your citizen viewpoint as to where that balance might be, and not, you know, not fight over it, but, okay, let's find that healthy balance of projects that meet a specific identified need, like certain streets we think need to be a priority, let's get those done. But we also need to put some stuff in there to improve the quality of life of Edmond. So let's identify a few things there, bring kind of a mixture of projects together.
I was rereading what the resolution says, and we are to review and provide recommendations to the city council regarding capital improvements to be constructed by sales tax funds to be considered. I mean, I think they want us to be, not this street necessarily, but I think they want us to give them some pretty good suggestions, and we're supposed to kind of represent the citizens. If we as a group think that these are things, then we're supposed to represent what the voters would maybe support and want.
Keep in mind that I think it's important to remember that the analogy to a business only goes so far with government, and we hear it all the time. We need to run government like a business, and there are a lot of things that we do need to do like a business, and things we try to do. But if we truly ran the city of Edmond like a business and only did those things that we make money, we'd sell water, sewer, and occasionally electric, and that's it. Because nothing else makes money. And that's a reality. I mean, the police department doesn't make money, fire department doesn't make money. We don't make money on our street program, and that's one of the huge differences. So there's a lot of things we need to do in terms of an analogy to a private business that makes sense, but it's not a private business. And the flip side of that is that projects that maybe when you're looking at it, standing back, looking from an objective point of view, you might say, well, that's not anything we're interested in at all. There may be a large constituency of people that see that as a critical thing, and they're going to want it done. And they ought to be heard in some fashion. So the private business analogy, to be very candid, only goes so far. It should be there, but you can't take it to the end.
That's very true, and I think some of the projects that stick out in my mind are the front of house things, such as you know, downtown master plan, and inside of that would be, you know, look at this community center. This is a center where people come and they have meetings here, and look at the meeting space. It needs to be upgraded. And look at our city hall. We don't really have a magnificent city hall to be proud of. Maybe we should have a magnificent city hall.
John?
So early in one of the first meetings, it was recommended that we hear from each of the groups of projects, and I think we've made it through a few of them. I know that's been helpful to me, at least understand how that specific area, so such as traffic, is looked at and funded and thought about. I mean, could we continue down that path and finish out the categories to at least understand from Parks and Recreation and understand,
We can. We kind of brought Larry in to cover everything and and then determine where we were going to go from there, but we certainly can kick that
And
back.
we can start that next meeting if you want to, depending on what you want. We'll have the people here to discuss.
I like that, and we could have, 5 of them in one meeting.
I think so too.
I mean, we don't have to have them all take a meeting, but I think it would help us all to know specifics, and we could ask them questions.
I think that's a great point. I mean, I come in here with my own biases and what my self-interests are, and that understanding the burden, that this, we're really representing the citizens of Edmond on this committee, and I think that really listening to.
Along those lines of what you just said, and because we are representatives of the citizens, what if, in conjunction with doing that, if each one of us were tasked with sending back to you or a coordinator our top 3, our top 5, each of us personally, and then let's throw that out there and analyze it, because number 1 would probably be clear, number 2 would probably be clear, and so on and so forth. When we get down lower, then we can kind of prioritize those. Would that be helpful?
Can we send that to Andrew and not break any rules from is that all good?
So I'd say top 3 projects, top 3 concepts, top 3.
From each of us, so what,
Well,
Do we want to do that after?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, 'cause I don't know. I don't know all the needs.
Yeah.
I mean, it may change after I hear a presentation.
Right.
It would just be from your circle of
Yeah.
your life, yeah, so it's.
That's a
either-
great idea.
Yeah, I think,
After the next meeting.
I mean, if you look at the city list, the staff list, there's 3 sentences, 1 little sentence about regional water retention and stormwater projects. Oklahoma City right now, that would be a top priority.
Well, but I'm thinking as a
So
citizen.
we need some more information than just a sentence.
Because the majority of the citizenry doesn't think like planning or council or anywhere along those lines. So then I think if we step down and said, well, in our role as ordinary citizens serving on this task force, let's see what's important to each one of us and throw that. Now, whether we do that before or after, I think that helps us prioritize what's important to this microcosm of the citizens of Edmond.
well, we can collect it and then see if it changes too. I mean, I don't think it prevents us from collecting it again after we're able to see the broader needs in the community, so.
And it might be very congruent with what the staff has done.
Exactly.
Yes, Cody?
To clarify, are we doing our top 3 specific projects or top 3 overall priorities? 'Cause
So I think you could be as either, not super general as to just generate revenue, but, some type of project orientation to it, but you can be as specific or as general as you want. If mine may be downtown improvements or downtown revitalization, but someone else might have a downtown parking garage, maybe there's a little bit diversity in how it's specific or general it could be, and not giving a ton of direction to start off with, just to see what we get.
so it sounds like, in general, we're not coming up with a prioritized list by committee, but it's more of a, let's hear from each area, let's draw our general conclusions, come up with 3, provide that as a data input, and then just aggregate the results.
And I think that gives us a topic to discuss in here, and maybe focuses a little bit more. Because if the top 3 are just so blatantly clear,
Yes.
that's the top 3.
Yeah, because I think to Phil's point, to get into and then start debating that list is where we're gonna lose the
Yes.
value.
I don't think we
But
need to do that.
At least providing what did we hear out
Yeah.
of that session and what were our top 3 would be.
And I don't think on the ballot, you're gonna have a list of probably 10 projects. I think that it's gonna have to clarify that there's gonna be a couple that maybe come to the top as being the priorities, as far as what we communicate to the public, I would think.
You said on the ballot.
Well, I mean,
Not-
just whenever we're
That you would
communicating, it,
identify as a-
whenever we're
as a
identifying it,
recommendation.
yes. Sorry.
Yeah, not on the
Yeah, sorry.
public ballot.
Or selling points.
Or selling points or PR.
It's in the
campaign,
marketing.
Yes,
That's what they are.
it is in the marketing.
So next meeting, then having a group of them here representing different areas so we can give presentations, do some Q&A with, and then after that meeting, sending in our top 3 to Andrew, who can aggregate, or I can help him aggregate that information, so.
Well, or will it take 2 meetings to get everybody's?
Yeah,
Oh, I
likely-
think
likely
it probably will. Is
Yeah.
it all right with us if we pick a few that will be here next time and then the others?
Absolutely.
That
Is
sounds
okay?
really good, if that's.
Because I don't think you'll get through that whole list
No.
in
No.
one hour.
And number 4 has the review, the projects that are currently projected on a 2000 capital improvement tax, sales tax fund. I'm not sure who was going to do that piece, but do you?
We can say it again.
We
Number
have
four,
provided
number
that
4,
list.
is that something that we,
What was number 4? What was
the
it?
review projects, do I have a different agenda? Maybe? No, the review projects that are currently projected in the current 2000 capital improvement sales tax fund.
Yeah, we provided that.
Yeah,
they said
provided
It just
that,
made-
so-
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had any questions. I'd
Do we
be-
need to discuss it, or?
Yeah, well, it's up to you. If you had any questions, I'd be happy to clarify anything that's in that list.
We just put that in as filler in case we needed more time.
I was trying to stay on track.
Well, I just wanted to offer, you guys have covered a lot of ground tonight. You've made some really important decisions from a staff perspective that's really helpful for us to understand your direction. I mean, just think about it, you've decided that you want the sales tax to be extended. You, after a lot of discussion, came back, circled back around and said, we think the rates ought to stay at the same. And you said, okay, no less than 5, but no more than 10. So that is a great, great step forward, and we really appreciate that. And now we're still struggling a little bit with the process to be followed with regard to prioritizing projects and things like that. But by doing what you've done tonight, you've really kind of taken a good bite out of what the overall task, I think, is you all been tasked with. I think that's great, and we appreciate that. So I think our understanding of your direction is that 2 weeks, we'll come back with, I think we'll probably have somebody from engineering. Steve Manning can talk forever about traffic issues, and he's very good at it and trying to explain how we combine our money. He may or may not be one that'll be available, police, fire, other things. So we can provide you with some really good information from the people that deal with it every single day and how to make these things work. So we can fill up our time next time on that, and then we'll be good to go. So thank you so much, really appreciate that.
Yeah, very helpful tonight, thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
We adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.